I rarely watch anything I'm in. I find it mortifying, and I'm like one step forward, 5 steps back. And sometimes I've watched things and just thought, I'd say I'm never going to do any more acting. But I did sit with this because I have respect for Rebecca and her family who were also there. But I'm glad I did, because I saw her vision, and I saw what she. I mean, the really the other character in that film is the woods itself, and it was supposed to be Poland, but you know the woods of her family's homeland were as valid, really. And it's she's done a lot with a little, if you see what I mean, because I don't think there was a huge budget for that film.
For those people listening that don't know, and I'm sure most people do, but you know, you're an amazing actor, you're also a writer as well. It seems like you've had this sort of creativity and love for the art and performing arts ingrained in you from a young age. Was it always something that you kind of wanted to get into? You know, can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, and it's strange now, and I think it's something to do with turning 50 2 years ago, and sort of being invited to write, because I've just finished a second book, which has subconsciously become all about childhood and how it manifests into your sort of growth as an adult. And what I realise is that my instincts as an actor were born out of playing musical instruments and reading literature, rather than the desire to perform. I think I remember having a history teacher who just completely sort of turned everything into a brilliant story, and we made a film about the Wars of the Roses with cardboard box horses galloping around the playing field, and so it was the storytelling part of my brain that was being triggered back then, rather than wanting to get sequins on and do tap dancing. So that's why I think I'd gone in through the wrong door, but but it served me really well. And actually I'm really passionate now. I mean, we just had a slight segue here. We just had a little consultation with the Shadow Cabinet about this, about making sure that drama is put on the curriculum in an essential way, so that kids, it's not like a hobby or something which isn't valued, because I think drama and music in schools gives kids something, you can't measure it in terms of its fiscal quality. It gives you something for life. And I was transformed by doing drama. Like, I went from a sort of shy kid that could barely form a sentence to actually being able to communicate. So
yeah, absolutely.
Did that answer your question?
No, it's so true though, because my son took GCSE drama, much to our shock, because he's the shyest child, because he inherently wanted to become more confident in groups and stuff. Which is, and then you go and see his end performance, you're like, who is this kid? Like, he's not like this at home, and he's performing, and he's writing his own material for their shows and stuff. Then he did this performance. He came home and he was like, I want to do this at A-level as well. Yeah. You know, and it's just that, and it's brought him out of himself, maybe much probably like you as well. I think it's so integral.
And I've worked with actors who are, for example, severe stutterers that really, really struggle to form a sentence offset. The minute the director calls action and they've got someone else's lines to say, it's like they are a different person, and it's quite remarkable. So in a sort of microcosm, that can expand to all kinds of things. So I think kids learn empathy, they learn teamwork, they learn how to, that is empathy, putting yourself in other people's shoes, and also having a vocabulary to express themselves. I think a lot of anxiety in childhood is to do with not having enough words to talk, so they punch. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason. This was what we were talking about at this consultation. There's a reason why actors coach politicians on how to stand up and speak publicly as well, because it's that ability to communicate. So hopefully things might change for the better.
Wow, that's amazing that you've sort of gone into that.
I mean, it was a party. It was a party with drinks. But,
all comes out now.
I
we had a meeting.
This is my chance. I did manage to get around to every single one of them and just sort of put my ideas in their head.
But again, that speaks volumes about your passion for it and for the art form as well. And, especially with like sort of the film and TV industry and stuff like that nowadays, a lot of it can be about exposure or fame or money or whatever it is. And I think it's really special when you see someone that is kind of like a modern Renaissance person, like has their fingers in all these pies. And
well, I realise, I mean, I was going into education at a time when there were grants to be had from local authorities. They don't exist anymore. So I feel like there was this narrow window where somebody like me from my background managed to slip through the net. And I was at drama school with some very, very wealthy, very influential people. And I did sort of think, I don't really belong here. I'm a kid from, working class kid from the Midlands. But I want kids like that to have those opportunities. Not that I'm able to do anything actively, but it's definitely in my head.
Amazing. Well, it's amazing. We've seen a lot of your work actually, and we watched The Boy in the Woods last night, didn't we?
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible. Really moving,
Thanks for
really
watching
touching. I mean, yeah, of course.
I think you've had like a European sneak peek because it's only been screened at Manchester last weekend. So
thank you for
I
that.
just have a
Of
feeling it's
course.
going to blow up, and I think it should as well. I just think, when you watch something, you're like, this is going to, people need to see this. It's really special.
thanks. Yeah, it was one of those job offers that came in again in a little window of opportunity because actually I only filmed for 2 weeks in Northern Ontario. And a lot of my agent were like, you don't really need to do this. You're not going to earn a lot of money. But I read the biography of Maxwell Smart and I just thought, I can't not do this. Partly because I wanted to be involved in the retelling of his story. And also Rebecca is a documentary filmmaker this was her first feature. And that fascinates me because I love working with documentary or journalists. I think there's I've used her actually as a character in my second book, this eye for the truth and hunting down the truth, which is sort of what the whole filming process was. It was really difficult to do any acting in front of her or her camera because she's like, I'm not looking for that. She sort of left it all alone, and working with Jet Klein, who plays the young Max. I always get a kick out of, I always learn something when I work with children, although he's a teenager, but I mean his skill is far more than anything I could ever aspire to, and he doesn't even know he's got it. It's so I come away from it with having gained a lot, but I'm glad you liked it. And I don't know, it's really hard for independent films to get traction, and she's fighting to even get a screening in the UK, but hopefully there'll be some I think everyone wants a cinematic release, theatrical, because it deserves to be seen on the big screen, but more than likely it will be on a streaming platform.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was saying, even this morning, we were sort of reflecting on it, and I was saying, like, even like the palette and everything is beautiful. It's like just really beautiful. Like you say, it deserves to be seen on a big screen because it is cinematic.
Yeah. And it's funny because I rarely watch anything I'm in. I find it mortifying, and I'm like one step forward, 5 steps back. And sometimes I've watched things and just thought, I'd say I'm never going to do any more acting. But I did sit with this because I have respect for Rebecca and her family who were also there. But I'm glad I did because I saw her vision and I saw what really the other character in that film is the woods itself. And it was supposed to be Poland, but the woods of her family's homeland were as valid, really. And it's she's done a lot with a little, if you see what I mean, because I don't think there was a huge budget for that film. And it went to Toronto Film Festival. I think we won the Audience Choice Awards at Manchester as well, which is nice. But yeah, and I'm just really happy for her.
Yeah, it's great. And for those who don't know, obviously we're talking about this film, but can you give us a little brief kind of like description of what the film's about?
What's he banging on about? So it's based on the story of Maxwell Smart, who wrote a biography, and then Rebecca made a documentary about his life called Cheating Hitler. And it's about a Jewish boy who is being transported to the death camps out of Buchach in Poland, and he manages to escape. And he hides with a farmer for a number of months. But then the sort of hunt for Jewish people gets closer and closer to the point where the farmer, which is my character, Jasko, actually has to turn him out from the house, and he takes him into the woods. And he hid in the woods for a year and survived. And the man is now 94. He's become an astonishing artist. He lives in Montreal. He's had the most extraordinary life. He's probably done every job you could ever think of to survive. And in a way, it's strange because on paper it should sound like a tragic tale, but you come out of it feeling like this man is a hero. His survival toolkit is just unbelievable, and he's still got this extraordinary energy at 94.
Yeah.
So yeah, I come out of it feeling sort of bigger in my heart, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you, because it's such an affecting piece. Like, you know, when you're working on a story like that, like it must have a little bit of a toll on you. Like, you know, when you're kind of immersing yourself in this, you know, like you say, it's hopeful, but there is a lot of tragedy in there.
Yeah, I think Rebecca took a lot of care ensuring that Jet and the little lad, I forget his name, who plays Yannick, she took a lot of care over their mental health during the shooting.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like throwing that word around, but just making sure that he was okay after every take, because he was putting himself through it. With regards to myself, you know, I've got those coping mechanisms, but also because documentary film root in and real story based on real person who was around, you feel like I can't embellish this, I can't dramatize it, I can't think, how can I make this scene more intense? It's like, just be honest, just play the scene for what it is, play the stakes. And with a character, and the interesting thing about my character Yasko was that Max never was able to track him down, or any member of his family. So he was sort of became untraceable. And I think Rebecca was telling us that the man Yasko, the farmer, he can't be elevated to the Jewish memorial because the people that's helped. I forget the name of it. I should remember that. Because you need 2 eyewitnesses, and there was only his eyewitness, so there's no members of his family left. So that alone, I just thought, okay, so potentially this man that saved a boy's life indirectly may well be forgotten one day. However, she's making this film, so it's my responsibility to tell the story truthfully and represent him. You know, maybe there are descendants of his somewhere in the world that might see this film and go, that was my grandfather. Again, that might be an added bonus of this film being shown in Eastern Europe. You never know.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
Yeah.
That would be an amazing thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Good point. That is incredible. Yeah, and I mean, there was, you know, he's a very 3-dimensional character. There was that internal dilemma as well going on with your character, because it wasn't, you know, unfortunately he did, I don't want to give too much away, so I'm trying not to say, but he did have to sort of send him out into the woods, you know. So just in terms of like becoming that person, I can imagine it's quite difficult role to sort of step into, and you did it incredibly.
Thanks. I did kind of just think he's torn at one point, because the survival of himself and his own family, his wife and his young baby, is standing on a knife edge. If he keeps this boy in the house, he's subconsciously teaching him survival techniques early on in the film, so I think quite as soon as he comes into the house, this man knows at some point he's going to have to leave. But I also sort of stood outside the character and thought, you know, were I to be in that situation in present day, you know, and we're talking about the border of Poland, which has been redrawn so many times. And if you look at where Buchach is, it's actually in Ukraine right now. So I was looking at that thinking, okay, you're fleeing war. I mean, it gets more relevant the more you talk about it. You knock on someone's door and you hope that a person like Yasko exists that would say, come in, you can sleep in my hayloft, I'll take care of you. You hope that those people exist, and I hope, or, you know, questioned, would I be that person? Would I be able to put myself on the line? And it's not as easy as just, you open your door to a refugee. It's different. But so yeah, he was somebody that I aspired to be in terms of courage.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, obviously, like sitting in a studio in London, we can all be like, yeah, I would take someone in, you know, I would do it. But actually, you know, it's quite shocking. That's the scene with the vegetables. And again, not giving too much away, but like my jaw fell open at that point, because you realise like sort of how serious the stakes are.
Yeah, and it's like it's when war is that close to your door. I mean, we're always a bit removed from it, especially in the United Kingdom. But the border of Poland has been a place where lots of refugees have been fleeing, and so yeah, those conversations have been had in recent history.
Yeah,
there's always a risk with Holocaust films and stories because it is a well-trodden path and can be romanticized or dramatized. I'm going to use Schindler's List. I love that film, but there's a sort of sweeping score and it feels epic. And you're sort of emoting all over the place while you're watching the film, but it's like that. Then there's The Boy in the Woods, which is a different kind of film. It's a more silent story, and it's a more personal, individual story. It's not about the kind of big picture. It's about an individual kid's life. So yeah, it's a well-trodden path.
But I think in some ways that kind of makes it more. I think it's better that it was made as an independent film, to be honest with you, and it is a quieter, more somber feeling film, and like you say, there's not some huge score, and like it is very emotive in that way. And I think because it is about an individual, and it is an individual who's making it, and it kind of fits perfectly, I think.
And actually, going back to what you were asking me at the beginning, that one of the seeds of the film that germinates is how he was able to survive was because he had this artistic part of his brain that was able to transport him into art, and he survived mentally because he was painting pictures in his head with a feather. I mean, it sounds trivial when you say it like that, but actually it kept him alive. And then he went on as an adult to paint all those pictures. They exist now. I mean, he's a celebrated artist, so all of that. I mean, gosh, the brain is an extraordinary thing in terms of storage capacity, but he stored it all up, and then it came out in later life in an art form, which is, so I'm like, big up the arts.
Yeah,
exactly.
I know, it's so
which
crazy.
Is why you're perfect, that you're in it as well.
Yeah.
And it is, you hear some of these stories about sort of Holocaust survivors who had various different ways of surviving mentally, not just physically. Yeah. And this is just one of them. But like I say, it's the story of an individual, and I think in some ways, if it had been picked up by some huge production company and made into this big epic, I think it would have lost some of that magic, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I always feel like that as well. Sometimes huge budgets can make everybody get a bit back-footed when you're really fighting for scenes like, how do we make this work? We don't have any money to shoot it. Sometimes the most brilliant things can emerge.
Yeah, and I mean, we've recently entered the film industry in our own project. You've got more than me, Giles, but we're doing a project together, and you realise that when you have less money and you're really like scrabbling, like tooth and nail to try and get something made, the passion, you have to have that passion. You can't just rest on your laurels and be like, yeah, whatever. You have to fight for.
How long's your project been in development? Because it is like pushing a massive stone up.
200 years. I don't know.
I've got a film that's a couple of years in development.
Yeah, and we've funnily enough, we're doing a documentary which is earlier in development at the moment. But again, it's a lot, isn't it? Yeah. So
Well, I've got projects that I'm supposed to be in, and I'm already thinking I'm going to be too old for this. By the time I'm going to be like in my 60s.
It's a tough industry. When it comes out, this is why it's so good to like tell people about films like this, because it's just what's gone into it.
A lot of heart and soul.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's funny enough. Yeah, it is a perilous industry. I obviously, as Sophie says, kind of just recently dipping toes in it, and it's quite surreal and balmy. You've been in it for a long time, so you've probably seen a lot of stuff. Probably got a lot of war stories, but
I've seen, talking about the industry. I mean, it's in my lifetime. It's gone from, cinema and to channels on the television to this massive shift to streaming. Streaming is everything. A bit of a bloated overspend in the streaming industry, which is now in contraction. And it's almost like, independent film is almost decimated. It can't exist without streaming, but streaming is kind of killing. We're in a precarious place, which is why I think it's important that, I do think this current government has just given some bigger tax breaks for movies under 15 million, which is massive, because I think Boy in the Woods was probably around 3 million. I may be wrong, but that's classed as low budget. But Zone of Interest, I think that was €3 million. But it has had a massive life because it got a lot of attention. But we're all on thin ice at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've spoken to people like Alice Lowe, who's just recently done Time Stalker, which is a great film, and she put a thing recently saying, look, I can shoot stuff for less. Yeah, like I just want but it's getting those little breaks, like even with public funding and stuff is still tricky because there's like a ceiling, isn't there?
There is. I mean, and also technology like the 4K camera is very useful. Drones have changed everything. You can get like a lot of production value in film now, but it's post-production and things like that cost them money. Yeah. And AI, I mean, it's like,
don't get started.
I feel like it should just be like e-numbers. Like anything that's generated by an AI needs a little e-number on it to say you can listen to that or not. It's up to you.
It's not good for you. It's not good for your body and your mind.
It might be if you don't care, but I don't want a script generated by a computer. I want a human hand on it.
We've spoken a lot about this, haven't we? Like creating art using AI.
So Sophie's an artist, fine artist, that's my and you're sort of starting to see, like in your industry, like people kind of generating images that they then replicate as their own.
I mean, I don't mind a bit of AI around my wrinkles.
Well, Jamie was saying last week we were in, I was like, can you just make me look a bit less tired? And he's like, oh, hey, I can sort that out for you. This is so scary. It's crazy.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So it's something we've talked a lot about, and I'm personally very passionate about because it's just, I don't know, there's just something about like the loss of art in all of this, and I feel like the more technology grows, in some ways it's good for the industry, but in other ways you do lose that love of the art and the love of the creation, love of the process, and that's when it's really refreshing to meet people who clearly do it for the right reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's made me much more aware and appreciative when I go to see live music or live theatre or a concert, and I get depressed because everyone's filming the thing.
Not actually watching.
In front of their own face, they're filming the concert, and you're like, you're missing it. Yeah. But I do think that there's going to be a younger generation that don't understand the difference between when something is auto-tuned or they're lip-syncing to real live voice or live orchestra. They'll think it's someone's stuck an iPod in and is playing. So I was at the theatre last night, and I'm sort of watching the orchestra pit, and you're sort of listening and watching and thinking, this is a pit full of musicians. All of them have 30 years plus of like intense training, all playing together, and you're like, that. There's no value you can put on that, really.
It's crazy, isn't it? Have you ever been to seen a film played in the cinema with the orchestra? You can get like Lord of the Rings and stuff like big like Star Wars and stuff where the orchestra is playing the soundtrack as you're watching the film.
The Hobbit would be a good one to watch. Maybe
you should pitch that.
Sure. Yes. One of my favorite Christmas outings that I had in America was on Christmas Eve, and we went to see Home Alone.
Oh, wow.
Orchestra.
Amazing.
It was the most fun I've ever had in a concert venue, because you're watching a beloved film that you know every moment of, the music, and then you're watching the orchestra having a ball, like they're really enjoying themselves, laughing. Amazing. And like when there's no score on, they're all kind of watching the film. It's just brilliant. I think, we should do more of that.
Oh, amazing. I want to see that now. But again, it's going back to the creation, the art, and humans creating something. And again, I think future generations, possibly with film, that will watch like these huge AI generated productions, and it just kind of changes expectations, I think. I think then your expectation becomes so unrealistically high when you watch something that is slightly lower budget with real people acting and stuff. It's kind of less impactful in some ways, but
there's a bit of a move back towards, Chris Nolan's a perfect example. He actually used quite minimal CGI with Oppenheimer. I think he's still shooting on film, building models, and I'm just like, you're in my lane. But I think it's why actors do go back to the theatre as well, because like when you watch dance or something like that, you can't call cut if something goes wrong. Once you start, it's gonna go all the way to the end, whether you like it or not. So you either, stand up on your feet and get on stage and say the lines, or someone else is gonna it's quite frightening to think it's like an unstoppable train, which is why you get, before the sort of 5 minutes before the show, you get this sort of engine running in you, which is quite frightening, and your palms get sweaty because you think, I can't run away now. I can't leave the stage door and flee, because I'll be, and there's people, you hear them all waiting in the auditorium. So, but I'm going to try and go back on stage next year.
Amazing.
A bit more skydiving. I call it skydiving.
Yeah.
Jumping out of a
because a lot of people say, like, they've done a bunch of, like, obviously being on sets and, you've got that, and it's different kind of acting, right?
Yeah.
But that purity and that kind of...
And you don't have an audience on set because the crew are just not bothered about what you're doing at all. They're just busy with their technology. So, no, it's nice to do something live. Really is.
Yeah, we were chatting in the car on the way up about the concept of like method acting, and I was sort of, because I've worked in the film industry when I was young as crew, and I was sort of saying, like, it's an interesting concept to have some, like a crew full of like sparks and just like blokes and normal people just doing their jobs, and like, could you just go on your mark there? And then there's just some like really flamboyant, like, like just fully in character, immersed creative in the core, like the one creative on set, and they're just fully in the zone. And then you've got like a bloke that's just like, could you stand on that mark, please?
I mean, luckily, I mean, those crews are becoming less and less stereotypical, I have to say. I'm working on Missing You at the moment up in Manchester, and there's an equal split of men and women.
Oh, really? Not like in my day, then.
First time I've ever worked with a female director of photography, not just camera operator, but director of photography, who is basically ordering all the sparks around. I mean, sparks by general tend to be, electricians tend to be male. I don't know why electricity attracts men. But, yeah, it's just nice to see the whole floor opening up to everybody, and it does change things, I've got to say.
Oh, that's awesome.
On Stay Close, I had a female camera operator and Steadicam operator, and sometimes the director will say to there'll be two cameras, and say to the Steadicam operator, just rove and look for detail. And what she was looking at was very different to what a male operator would be looking at.
Interesting.
And the example I use is, there was a scene, it's a little Easter egg, you might want to go back and watch Stay Close. There's a scene with a gun, and you think my character's about to be shot, but he manages to talk her down, and he sort of puts his hand on hers, and she releases her finger from the trigger. The male operator would have focused on the gun. The female camera operator was focused on the hand.
Interesting.
And
interesting.
I mean,
slightly more romantic.
I'm being incredibly general there, but it is just the difference between what the female gaze and the male gaze is, and we need both.
Totally. That's awesome. I like to hear that, because you do kind of find, as a woman on a film set,
but also it happened, like, it wasn't a directed piece of action. It just happened in the moment. Yeah. And then when the director called cut, I sort of turned to the operator. I was like, "Did you get that?" And she went, "Yeah, I found it. I was watching your hands." But she didn't know it was going to happen. She just instinctively went to hands. So
interesting.
She was looking at body language rather than the gun.
Women.
I know, it's just
we're so,
it's great.
we're so intuitive.
No. But I guess what it says is, like, having a diverse kind of group of people on a set is really, really important. Yeah, because you do get like those different things, like you say, those things that you wouldn't necessarily think of.
Well, I was going to say, how in The Boy in the Woods, obviously it's the story of a boy, a man. Yeah. And how was there anything that kind of, having a female director? Yeah. Did that change the dynamic slightly within filming? Did it bring anything new, to the table that perhaps having a male director wouldn't have?
Do you know what? Her gender was just less important than her knowledge of the story and her route in. I think we've moved past the surprise of the director being female. There is an assumption that the director is going to be a he to the outsider, but we're not surprised anymore. What I did notice, and I did enjoy about Rebecca, but I don't think this is to do with gender at all, is just, And it's a bit, I call it like the surface tension in water. So when a scene is happening organically, especially with a minor, you know, Jet was 14, I think, and the younger boy was 11. So if something's happening, many directors will call cut, step in and start directing them and be like, now try this, now try that, and manipulating the scene. And Rebecca really left it alone. So she didn't tap the surface tension of the water to create ripples. If it was working, she really left it alone and then just let them carry on, let them play. So she wasn't disturbing them, which I thought that's specific to her as a documentary filmmaker, because I imagine it's a bit like trying to shoot gorillas in the you know, in Africa. You sort of have to hide in the trees for a long time. You can't coax them out with a carrot.
Yeah.
I was going to say, actually, interestingly enough, because I'm really into film and I watch a lot of things about directors, and obviously some directors give lots of notes and some give very little, and actually people do, sort of actors don't like having lots of notes. I don't know what you're like with that. Like, do you like a director to be kind of keep getting you to tweak things all the time, or you?
I like a new idea.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's the same in theatre. The repetition is the thing that you learn to calibrate. So you're trying to refresh the whole time. It's really nice when you get a new idea, but I also like, it's a bit like you have to run up to the scene and hold it in a certain place. And if the director has too much, or isn't sensitive to that, let's say, they'll come in and all of that energy will fall to the floor. And sometimes the director will see the energy is up here, especially if it's quite an emotional scene, and will just literally step in, whisper one word in your ear, and so you can hold on to the moment and then keep going. And because of digital camera as well, you can do a rolling reset, so you don't cut. You can just keep doing the scene over and over again, and suddenly you'll find something which is out of your control. Because the irony of acting is that you have to learn the lines, you have to hit the marks, you have to be in control, but there's a moment where it's out of your control and you don't choose to do something, it just happens. That's what you're looking for. Magic moments.
I mean, that kind of makes sense then, I guess, having a sort of typically a documentarian then filming something like that.
She's looking for the moment she wasn't expecting.
Yeah. And we've spoken to a documentarian on the pod, and I remember him saying, like, sometimes you feel uncomfortable and you want to jump in and say something, and you have to literally pull yourself back because you need to get that, you know, you need to get as much out of it as possible, and then you'll come away afterwards and you'll be like, oh, we got it, you know, that was it. But you get that from pulling yourself back and not interfering constantly.
Yeah. I had a really interesting experience working with Julie Delpy on My Zoe. She was in it, wrote it and directed it, and kind of produced it. She did say afterwards,
it's a lot of jobs.
She'd forget to shoot herself because she was so focused on camera. But she had, I think it's probably because she's an actor too, but there was a couple of moments when I remember one specific moment quite early on in the shoot where, I'd just lost my mom, so I was in a very strange place, but there was a scene at a door where I was coming back to tell her that our daughter had died. And the camera was on her, and the door opened, and she called cut. She went, no, turn around, because he's ready. He's in the place I want now. So she literally moved the camera in like 30 seconds, which was like a whole setup.
Wow. And
she knew straight away. She could feel the energy coming off me. And I afterwards I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. That's very, very rare. Most directors were like, no, we're set up for this shot, so you know, you either hold on to it or you don't. But she was looking for that real moment, so I appreciated that.
And I guess being an actor sometimes it's beneficial when you're a director.
And also it wasn't something I was trying to create. It was that thing that I wasn't in control of it. The door opened and I saw my wife's face, and it started to happen, but the camera was behind me, so she knew straight away, like, no, let's turn around quick.
Interesting. Would you ever direct? You know, would that be something that would interest you? I
think I could get performances out of actors, and I could get scenes working with actors. I don't know whether I'm clever enough to know the technology behind it and the cuts. I haven't studied that. I sort of have, because I've been in the middle of it, but there are a lot of people out there that have come up through film editing, and they really do understand lenses and shots and depth of field, and and what makes a good cut. Although I do watch things now and I go, I would take 3 seconds out of that, or I would move that scene around, which is what I'm doing at the moment with writing. I'm kind of doing my own little cut.
I was going to say, let's talk about the writing, because obviously that's something fairly new for you. I mean, I don't know if it is new. You might have been doing it your whole life, but
no. Well, I've sort of written biography for character a lot. I mean, it's like an essay, I suppose, on the backstory of your character. I was invited to write something for Audible because of their algorithm says he's one of our readers, and they went, "Would you be interested in writing something?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to." And then panicked because I thought, "Oh gosh, this is a big deal, it's a 70,000 to 80,000 word novel." And then they started talking about ghostwriters, and I just said, I can't. I've got to write it myself. So I didn't even know if I could get to the end of it. But then once I started, I couldn't stop, and it's a bit like opening a floodgate. It was so enjoyable. And then when the book was handed in and finished, the first weekend afterwards, I was like, what do I do with my Sunday morning now? Can I write another one? And they were like, yep, what's your idea? So, and then subsequently what happens is that you've got these little antennae out that are sort of sucking up stories. So I've already got like, I know what book 3 might be. I know what book 4 might be. It will take one thing somebody said that you go, oh, that's a great idea for a story.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of what's the opposite of what's happened to you. You started off writing, and now every time you hear something, you're like, "I'll make a great film."
I've gone into like.
That's exactly what I do. But I'm like, write the book first.
Yeah.
I think I write books. I think the first book was a film that I was making in my head that I just then wrote down in novel form, because that's how my brain works. I think that's. I've spent so much time on film sets. I call them scenes, not chapters, and I work in cuts. I mean,
I think that helps, because I don't know about anyone else, but when I read a book, I kind of imagine it in my head like it's a film anyway. So sometimes with like music.
Do you ever think about readers before film existed? Like, how did their imaginations work? Like when people were reading the Brontes for the first time, and they'd never seen a television show or been to the cinema. Like, how did their brain work?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would imagine that you would have to, when you're imagining the characters, you'd have to just use people you already know, because you can't really invent someone.
You put yourself in the character.
Oh, I do that anyway.
But we see things in cinema, don't we?
I'm Emily Bennett.
Like you hear music and you see cinema in your head. I mean, there's a German word for it. It's called Kopfkino.
Yes, yeah.
Which is like the cinema of the mind. I use that all the time because I live in that state and I write in that state.
Yeah, so I live on my own in the woods, as we discussed earlier, and it's my favourite thing to do. Like, of an evening, if I'm finished all my work for the day, I'm like, I think I'll just daydream for a bit. Just
put some music in. Yeah. I mean, when I used to go running, I'd put the Bourne Identity in my headphones, and I was Jason Bourne pounding the streets of Dulwich.
Yeah, or like, they always say that the classic is when you listen to a sad song in the car and it's raining outside and you're like looking out the window.
Yeah. And you're crying and you look at yourself in the mirror and a tear running there. You're like, You
walk past yourself in the mirror as you're crying and you're like, it's a great scene.
And then you try and do that on a film set and they call action. You're like, I can't do it.
I can't do it.
I need the rain. I need the car. And I need
Oh, I can't even imagine. But I do think once you get that itch for like something creative, and it's like your brain changes gear, and that's how you perceive the world. Really. Yeah. Everywhere you look. I mean, I get it with my art. If I'm in the middle of a collection, I'll be like, that would make a great painting. Or even if I'm looking at something, instead of seeing the object, I see the layers of paint. It's weird. And so if you're in that writing frame of mind, I can imagine.
And it's not finite as well. People always worry that it will go away, or you'll lose it, or you only have a certain amount of it. And it's not. If you nourish it.
Yeah.
So it's like a garden you have to keep watering, and the nourishment comes from living a real life. They always used to say that, when you're in drama school in the early years, they'd say, you've got to go out and live a life because you need to gather your experiences, and that means the highs and lows of life as well. Which is why whenever you see a reality show and you see like an 18-year-old going, I've wanted to do this my whole life. You haven't even had a life. You haven't had a life.
Yeah.
But it's not. I mean, now at 50, I feel like, I've actually got some plants in the garden to start pulling out now. I've got stuff to use.
For sure. Yeah, and it will only get more and more as well. When you're 70, you'll be like, I knew nothing when I was 50 as a child.
Also kind of that's your life informing your art, but also, and again, this is why I bang on about kids being exposed to the arts. Art helps you deal with life as well. I think the highs and lows of life that you talk about. There's a sort of coping mechanism is to say this is a form of human nourishment that and it's the worst moment of my life. Losing parents is devastating, but at the same time, you're like, everybody goes through this. It's part of life. It's the cycle of life, and you have to look at how it's going to nourish you for the future. So.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's there when you need it as well. Like you say, like if you're going through a difficult time or when you're happy, sad, whatever it matters, we turn to music and
we do
and cinema and all whatever it matters.
It's lifelines.
Yeah,
the appreciation of music is a lifeline, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, going back to The Boy in the Woods, I think that's why it's quite special, because it really like puts things into perspective, I think. Obviously, with all World War II film or any tragic film where something terrible is happening in the world, it does put things into perspective. But yeah, it really it takes you away, I think, which is why I loved it so much and why I think it was such a good, like, quiet, poignant film.
There was a point early on in discussion when I was Zooming with Rebecca where she was describing Yasko's home, and I said, oh, great, don't get me a hotel, I'll just sleep in the hayloft and I'll live there for the shoot. And she went, it's going to be pretty cold in Northern Ontario. I was like, no, I want to do it. I'm going to go full method. Anyway, I got there, and then she took me to the location on the first day, and there were like kind of mice running around and no heating, no electric, no toilet. And I went, where's that hotel again?
Yeah. Such a diva.
Well, what the point being that, sometimes, comfort is not our friend in that situation. So I wasn't sleeping on a bed of nails, but you do have to be careful about, I'm not going to go back to my Four Seasons hotel and get a massage after I've played this scene. You try to match what's happening in your life. That's why I don't sometimes on those massive budget movies, the kind of lead actors are pampered and picked up in limousines, and it's all part of the ritual, but I'm like, that's not helping you to play that role.
Yeah, it's not quite method, but it's at least having some kind of lingering essence of that person within you when you leave set at the end of the day.
Do you want gold leaf on the top of your coffee? It's like, no, I'm just about to play this scene. So
this starving
it seems like a bizarre thing, really, to do that. Like, you would be like, I mean, I get that, there's big budgets and stuff, but like, just to
I've
be
never
like
understood the concept of putting actors on pedestals at all.
Or even like the celebrity culture, to be honest with you. We've chatted about that before on the pod, and it's fascinating, really.
Don't understand it.
Well, it's kind of similar to like how people have religion, I guess, but they turn that into celebrity worship and creating deities out of people.
I think it's a much more humble practice than that, really. We're sort of servants of the human condition, and I always feel like that in the theatre. It's like, this isn't about an actor standing up on stage showing off. It's about the audience. What do you feel? What do I make you feel? So, because sometimes we sit in an auditorium and it's virtuous or virtuosity in front of you, somebody exhibiting all of their skills as an actor, but you feel nothing, and it's like, it's about the audience, not you.
Yeah, I love that. That's really refreshing, actually, because I was having a conversation with my friend recently who's a director, and we were talking about, I won't say the film because I don't want to bash it, but it was a really long film by a young director, and we were like saying that this is the film that's been created by someone that hasn't considered the audience at all, and they just expect you to sit through this really long kind of, it kind of has a bit of an arrogance about it, I think. So it's great when people actually
there's a place for that. It's his
Hollywood,
film.
No, just kidding.
His goal might have been to absolutely frustrate the audience into getting up and leaving. That might have been the objective. But
it worked. I was like, I watched it in the cinema, and I was like, I can't wait to go home.
About as well.
We're all so different. I mean, that's the beauty of it. So for what is a 1-star review and hated it, to another person would be like, best thing I've ever seen. It keeps you going. Yeah.
When you finish working on a film, especially something as sort of intense emotionally as The Boy in the Woods, do you have a kind of transition period into like integrating back into your normal life, or is that quite seamless?
The first thing I do is book an appointment to get my hair cut, and I always get a haircut and shave.
Interesting.
Yeah.
get rid of all that.
Just shave it all off and then start again, start growing the beard again. Yeah.
There's something in that, I think.
It's a sort of, you need to sort of look at your face again and see something different, because you've sort of, I mean, the Crucible was probably the perfect example of that. When I did the Crucible at the Old Vic, I mean, it nearly killed me. It was 12 weeks of intense work, and I looked different by the end of it.
Yeah.
And even director would come into my dressing room. She came in on the last matinee, Faber, and she was like, she showed me a picture of the rehearsal. She's like,
look how sprightly
you've aged 10 years. She's like, but this is what I wanted.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, oh God, I look awful. It was just like, I saw something had changed in my face. So the first thing I did was shave, get a haircut, and be like, okay, I've got to somehow get back to myself. But that's just because of the length of time that it took.
Yeah. It's a full-on
rehearsal period.
but it's a full-on play as well. Like it's it's intense.
I didn't know the play was 3.5 hours long until the end of the second week of rehearsal, when we'd only rehearsed Act 1,
right?
And it was already 2 hours, and I was like, wait a second, how long?
But there's more.
And she was like, you read it, didn't you? I said, of course I read it, but I didn't time it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is long. I remember seeing that when I was younger.
If I'd have known, I'd have gone to the producers and said, we can't do matinees.
Yeah.
We had a 40-minute turnaround between shows, so I would go
Oh
upstairs,
man,
literally eat for 10 minits, lie on the floor and go,
yeah.
And they'd call the half, you'd be like, here we go again.
I think you deserved a shave after all that, man.
And a wash.
Deserved a lot more than a
Shave and a
shave.
wash.
God. That's crazy.
Just quickly going back to the writing stuff, have you got a process? I mean, you talked about music there and kind of creating these sort of mind movies. I'm unusual. Some people think it's unusual. And when I write, I often make a soundtrack or like a playlist or something because I find it evocative. Do you do anything like that? What's your kind of process? Do you like a silent room? What's?
I mean, I learned to write on long haul flights and in trailers between takes. So in order to do that, I suppose music helped me, but not listening to it, just understanding the structure of music. So the sort of 4-movement romantic Beethoven piece. So knowing that there's a coda, a first movement, a second movement, a fugue, a third movement, and a whatever you call it at the end of it. I don't know what. There's all these pieces that I learned in my A-level music, which works in the novel form as well. I think there's usually a third act, sometimes a fourth, sometimes a fifth, an epilogue. You need your development to sort of zenith in the middle and fall away at the end, and but also working on long form television, just understanding episode hooks, segment hooks between commercial breaks, just to keep the audience attention. So to me, that was like scaffolding. So put up the scaffolding of the whole story, which can change if you need it to. But once the scaffolding's up, then you can start laying the bricks. So that was the process really. And I've applied it again the second time around because it's the most efficient.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are sort of kind of rules in a way, like with storytelling, aren't there? Like I've written a bunch of scripts recently, and kind of that Save the Cat beat sheet thing has been like a bit of a godsend. Like,
I don't know what that is.
Oh, so there's a book called by Blake Schneider. It's called Save the Cat. It's all about, it's like kind of rules for screenwriting.
Yeah.
And he has a beat sheet. So like by like page 1, bang, this is your theme, and then by certain pages you got to have hit all these kind of markers.
Yeah.
And it kind of works for most. If you think about most screenplays, it kind of works for each one. It's quite interesting.
I'll have a look at that. I mean, it's interesting because it's the way I always approached any scene as an actor. Is that you would look at the scene and you'd realise, okay, so some of this is shoe leather, which I know will be cut out of the edit. So the person coming in through the door at the beginning, you don't always need it. But you need the bit where he picks the envelope off the table and opens it to find the bad news inside the letter.
Yeah.
You don't need him coming in. But so it's understanding that, but also understanding in any one scene, like what changes, what information does he collect, what effect does he have on the other person? And if it's not there, then you think, this scene is not necessary. It's just information. So you have to be quite. I've had to be quite brutal about. I've got chapters now that I'm reading, going, I love this chapter, but nothing happens.
Yeah.
No matter how much I love it, I'm going to have to get rid of it because nothing happens and it's not moving the story forward. So it will go in the bin.
Yeah. Are you good at? Because I always find editing, like for me, is always it's like homework. Like I don't like that process particularly. I don't find it enjoyable, but some people do. Yeah.
I didn't like it the first time around. To me, I'm not brutal about it. Like I won't take entire chapters and just chuck them out like my editor will.
Yeah.
I'm combing through the hair looking for nits, just going again again and again and being like, there's one left. There's just one left.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it slowly. Yeah. Or dandruff.
Dandruff.
Dandruff. You have to just keep cutting it out.
Nice.
Whereas the editor's straight in with the head and
one.
shoulders and
that took me back to my childhood.
Oh no,
then.
the editor's shaving the hair.
Yeah, she's shaving the hair off.
I need to keep the hair. I need to keep the hair.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah, it's interesting listening to all of this as someone that doesn't write at all, really. Just all this terminology.
I think everybody should write.
Yeah, me
it's
too.
It's amazing because once you start picking at your brain, the realization of what your brain has retained over the course of your life is quite a revelation.
Yeah.
Stuff that you don't even remember remembering.
Interesting.
And I find, I don't know if you found this, Richard, when I read stuff back that I've written, I think I either do not remember writing that,
right,
or that's not
drunk?
Me. Well, that may be that, but like that's quite good. Or like that doesn't. I'm sure that wasn't me that wrote that. Surely, like there's a kind of
because you
cognitive
whatever
dissonance
frame of mind you were in when you happened to be writing that.
Yeah.
What you just received from the world at that moment is somehow manifested on the pages. Yeah, the one of the exciting bits is kind of going back the day after and just doing a pass on what you wrote yesterday, and calibrating it, but thinking that's really nice, like removing stuff and changing things and thinking what was I thinking? And I'd had a drink.
Yeah. You go into a different state of mind, and I do think that your brain, like physiologically, you go into different brain waves. We were talking to a doctor last week, and she was saying, we were actually talking about when you die and your brain waves change. But then she said the same with when you're painting or when you're writing or when you're making or listening to music. Your brain waves change physically, and you go into this kind of like flow state, and that's when you and it's a dreamlike state. So when
you lose time completely.
Yeah, exactly.
Where did 6 hours disappear to?
Right, exactly. Sometimes it takes a minute to like get into that state of mind. Yeah. You're like sitting down at your computer or your canvas or whatever it is. You're like,
that's what happens in theatre as well. You get the 5-minute call. You're standing on stage, the lights go down, and then all of a sudden you're taking the curtain call, and you go, where did that 3.5 hours just go to? It's like you lose yourself, which I love. I love losing myself.
Right.
Possibly quite good when it's Crucible, because it's like 3 hours long. Can't wait for this 3 hours to race past.
3 hours felt only like 2.5. It's magic.
Yeah.
It is the magic.
Richard, we could talk to you all day, and it's been fascinating, but it would be remiss of me not to mention one of Sophie's favourite programmes of all time, which is North and South, which she watches on a regular basis.
I do. While I'm painting, because when I paint, I have to have something on that I've seen a million times before in the background, and it's usually for some reason like a period thing, maybe because I'm a woman, I don't know. So I like regularly, like at least once a year, just go through all of my period dramas and then stick it on. So yeah, I was watching that fairly recently actually.
And it's the 20th anniversary this year of that show. Nothing Gaskely, but it's 20th anniversary of that BBC show.
Amazing.
Yeah, the good old days of the BBC tentpole period drama
the
shot
BBC
on film.
Period dramas. They haven't made period dramas like it. Same with Pride and Prejudice, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know, was there like Emma or something?
But it'd probably be set in a bar with DJs and pop music. They don't trust
trying to make them all pop, all modern and all this crap. Like, I don't know. No, they are good, but BBC period dramas, love it. So thank you for that.
that was a kind of seminal moment for me, really. I'm so glad that there's finally awards happening for casting directors, because North and South happened for me because of Jill Trevelyan, who is still a prolific casting director, but she I was one of the first people that they saw, and they recorded the audition, and then I walked away thinking, no, I'm not going to get that. And they went, I think it was about 10 weeks later, they'd been around the houses looking for this actor and couldn't find who they wanted, and then she went back through all of the audition tapes right to the beginning, called me back in for a chemistry reading with the brilliant Denby Ash, and put it on film, and then I was cast. But it was by the skin of my teeth had it not been for her, Jill, going back through the tapes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I suppose she could have just been like, well, I didn't see anyone the first time. I'll
just keep looking,
do some more auditions and stuff.
So,
well, thank God, thank God.
And it feels like maybe that doesn't happen so much now. Would that be wrong to suggest that?
I don't know, to be honest. I know that actors and social media numbers and money next to their name changes how they are. Like the casting list is smaller now because most broadcasters are looking about as to whether they can be sold internationally.
If they've got value,
I mean, it's awful. It feels awful and it sounds awful. Because it means that, you know, people without a prolific name are finding it harder and harder to break through. But again, that's one of the things I'm really passionate about as I sort of move into producing, is trying to convince people to why don't we break someone's career with this role rather than, you know, having the same faces all the time. Although I've been one of those same faces, so I can't complain. But somebody did give me opportunities. Somebody did take a chance on me. So it's chicken and egg always.
Always, yeah. No, I've been having these conversations this week on a couple of movie projects and thinking that, but they're perfect for the role.
But then it's like, well, they don't bring the financing
in.
in.
Film on it.
And I'm like, well, let's just be bloody minded about it. Which is, we'll just make it more difficult to get the money, but we'll make it work.
But again, you're like, do you then make a better film because you're just being like, I am going to make this character pop.
Yeah. I was talking to someone recently in the film industry, and they were like, that they're trying to get us to cast a musician. They're not even an actor, and as far as I know, they've never even said they wanted to be an actor, but because they've got millions of social media followers and they're a pop star, they're like, let's try and get them on the film. It's like try and convince someone to become an actor.
I've been in conversations
rather than
like that.
Someone that's desperate for it and has that drive and that hunger, but isn't a social media star or whatever it is. It's tragic.
I mean, I'm gonna completely retract what I said as well, because I do think there can be, you know, treasure found in that place. And I used to be one of those people that was like, stay in your lane, but then I've just written.
It's tricky, isn't it?
Hogan did say to me, stay in your lane. I was like, but I want to just have a go in this lane for a while. I mean, I won't be releasing a pop song anytime soon, so don't worry about it.
I don't know. You know, in like 6 months to a year.
In my dreams,
that
in the shower.
That would be so funny.
Not in reality.
And then we're going to like just get that clip of you saying that
over
and over again. I'm not going to release a pop song. I'm not going to release a pop song. Just like remixed. I'm a huge believer that you should not stay in your own lane. That said, I think, you know, change lane if you're passionate about that, and if you want, you know, you have that yearning, that creative itch, not because you're like, that'll make me a bit of money. Do you know what I mean?
It's what your intention is behind it. I think that's
and also when the role is right. Like I think, you know, Lady Gaga playing that character in A Star Is Born. I mean, I had a raised eyebrow at the time, but then you watch it and go, it's totally the right choice. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So,
totally.
Don't always stay in your lane.
Yeah. But sometimes do.
Sometimes do.
If one of us is making the film, then stay in your lane.
And it's weird because there are some professions, and this is why the live arts is so important, because to be like a prima ballerina or a virtuoso cello player, you can't just step into that and go, I'm going to have a go at cello playing today. The Berlin Philharmonic. It's like that takes decades and decades of hard work, and it's like you can't fake it. You can't auto-tune it. You can't mime. It's like you cannot fake it.
Can't use a ghostwriter for that. So true.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, you know, obviously we're both very big fans of yours, so it's just nice to have you here and have a chin wag.
Thanks. Thanks for bigging up Boy in the Woods.
No, it's a brilliant film, and so hopefully we'll get a UK release at some point.
We're going to try and sort out a screening at the Olympic in Barnes.
That'd be amazing.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll shout about it because everyone needs to see this film. I think it's going to
thank you very much.
Be a big success. It already is, but yeah.